of TERI and Pure Earth, I, Varsha Gupta, extend my warm welcome to you all to the seminar titled Understanding Lead Poisoning Prevalence in India. As we know, lead is highly toxic chemical with severe public health impact. Lead poisoning occurs when it is indigested in drink or breathe in. Thus, contaminated food, water, and air can be a source of lead poisoning. However, the health impact of lead poisoning is not acute. It is built gradually in the body over months or even years. Hence, lead is known as a silent killer. A joint report by UNICEF and Pure Earth notes that lead is a potent neurotoxin that causes irreversible harm to children's brain. It is particularly destructive to babies and children who are below age of 5, as it damages their brain before they had the opportunity to fully develop, causing them lifelong neurological and physical impairment. A recently report launched by CSIR NITI Aayog found that in 23 states of India, average blood lead level are well above 5 microgram per deciliter. Today, our esteemed panelists will discuss the finding of these reports. The discussion will also focus on the sources and the impact of lead poisoning on public health during the next 2 hours. For more information, a digital scan code of both the reports are available on your table. Without further ado, I kindly request Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director Journal TERI, to deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon and very hearty welcome to this particular meeting, which is Understanding Lead Poisoning and its Prevalence in India. Well, whatever I wanted to say and the work which I have done a bit of research, she has already said that lead is one of the most dangerous kind of chemical. And I do remember as a child, like in thermometer, it was that it contains lead. So the moment there is any breakage of the thermometer, everyone was so careful that mercury, especially. So then it was that you really, really have to be careful. Now, what's the problem today? The usage of lead in batteries, it is going up. And with the result, the other problem is that we do not take care of our waste properly. And with the result, it's everywhere. Its consumption is going up. And also, the other problem is that from the earth also, because of extra or the water that we keep on extracting from the deep water tables, the lead and other heavy metals, they are getting into our food chain because we irrigate our crops from that. And as she rightly mentioned, because its concentration is so little, and they keep on building in the body and gradually they impact us. And it is really, really very dangerous for young children and women. The problem is also that we are really not sensitized towards it. Because when I talk of sensitization, I'll say every stakeholder, we should, like it's when we say most of the time, government is not doing anything. What is government? Government is part of us. So we give them certain responsibilities or they are responsible, but then are we doing our bit of work, which we should be doing more responsibly? What is it? How do we discard the waste? Are we conscious about using water for irrigation purposes? Are we investing in new technologies, such as when you talk about subsoil irrigation or sprinkler or drip irrigation versus flood irrigation? Because we are not pricing water properly, we are giving free electricity for irrigation purposes or charging hardly anything or with solar pumps. The water, it becomes a commodity which is free. And somewhere we also think because aquifers have no definitions, it's across the regions. And therefore, it is what is there for me? Why should I save water? And with the result, we are extracting more than what we should be doing. which results in concentration of heavy metals far greater than the permissible limits. But we as citizens, we as stakeholders, sometimes forget the ill effects on our next generation or even our generation. Look at the cases of cancer, the way they are going up, whether it's not we assign it to the use of pesticides, but it is not pesticides alone. We look at the cases of diabetes going up. Again, somewhere you can say it's lifestyle, but somewhere it is also the food we eat. The micronutrients, either they are lacking or heavy metals that are coming in our food chain. So therefore, I personally feel that it is responsibility of each one of us to get sensitized, to think about it for our future generations and for our good health and move in the right direction. So I'd like to thank UNICEF and Pure Earth for publishing this important report, The Toxic Truth, which was brought out in July 2020, which highlights the global lead poisoning issue. And the report received its validation from NITI Aayog and CSIR in the form of their report, Assessment of Lead Impact on Human and India's Response, which examined and reviewed the toxic truth data and findings for India. CSIR, NITI Aayog research, and the UNICEF's Pure Earth report highlight a major and massive public health crisis in India. And this review shows the scale and intensity of lead poisoning in India, particularly of children, which is indeed a very serious issue, and we cannot afford to ignore it any longer. Thus, it is an appropriate time for a national mission to effectively and comprehensively tackle lead contamination in India from multiple sources. And I'm sure with all of you around, it's going to be a very healthy, fruitful discussion. And I won't say we'll find a solution, but I'll say we will be able to take a baby step to solve this large problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for welcoming remarks and setting the context of the seminar. Now, I kindly request Dr. Vibha Dhawan to facilitate our esteemed panel of guests with a token of appreciation. To Dr. Rakesh Kumar, Mr. Richard Fuller, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Dr. Venkateshwar, Dr. T.K. Joshi, Mr. Vinay Jha, thank you, ma'am. Now, without further ado, we are moving to the technical session. We feel honored to have with us Dr. Pradeep Ghosh. He is Distinguished Fellow, TERI. Earlier, he was a member of Prime Minister Council on Climate Change, the Advisory Committee on G20 Matters of Ministry of Finance, the member of National Security Advisory Council. He is superannuated as Secretary, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. I kindly request Dr. Ghosh to moderate the session and take over the proceeding. Over to you, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, folks. And we have an exciting session ahead of us with a galaxy of speakers who will enlighten you on all that is to know about why lead is bad for you and how you are getting it in any case into your system. And what you can do about it, I'm afraid there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. But anyway, through public action, maybe collectively we can do something. So, you see, lead is on a very major pollution issue, which seems to have been forgotten over the years. Sometime in the early 1980s, we banned the spiking of gasoline with lead. And we thought that we'd done our job. I mean, by the time there was enough medical evidence about the ill effects of lead on the human system, and especially for small children, and we thought that we'd done our job. But then, of course, what we realized is that lead is by far the most important constituent of automobile batteries. And as the automobile population in India grew exponentially, so did the use of lead acid batteries. And then, of course, in India, we have a genius for recycling, reuse. And so they were recycled in makeshift, informal sector workshops. Well, what happened as a result is that lead leached into the environment, into the soil, into the water, whatever, and it got into the food chain, and then nasty things happened. And I think some of the research that will be presented today will show exactly what has happened. And so then the government put in place, the extended producer responsibility, and we thought that done. But not quite, because the informal recycling continues in the informal sector. And besides, there are a number of, other very traditional modes of ingress of lead into the, into the human system. Now, for example, married Indian ladies are very fond of putting a dot on their foreheads to signify that they are taken. Sorry, that is a gender incorrect expression, but whatever, to signal whatever their status. But that red dot consists primarily of red lead, which is lead, the peroxides of lead. And somehow it goes through the cutaneous system into the bloodstream, and then all kinds of things happen. And there are others. For example, in India, we like our spices to be brightly colored, much more brightly colored than they are in nature. And so they are spiked with various lead compounds. And so the upshot is that lead gets into our bodies, gets into the environment, and it does all kinds of nasty things. And here's the regulatory problem, that much of the routes through which it gets into the environment are through the informal sector. The formal recyclers are well regulated. They are generally, they generally conform to the regulations and so on. But the informal modes are very, very difficult to identify, let alone regulate. So while there are technical solutions, and these technical solutions are also not uneconomic, and while there is, of course, a very strong movement for ensuring, say, for example, purity of foods in India, spices in India, the brand name MDH, which is a very famous brand name for spices, essentially its USP was that it was unadulterated. And a humble spice seller became a billionaire, became a dollar billionaire, to simply the fact that his spices were recognized as not being adulterated. However, these risks remain with us, and we have to find solutions, not technical solutions. The technical solutions are all there. And so, but first, before we start doing that, before we focus policy attention and policy resources on this problem, we need to raise awareness. We need to raise awareness in the general public, the media, the social media. The social media needs to, keep talking about lead, and then perhaps gradually it will penetrate the asbestos-lined craniums of our policymakers, and then hopefully something will be done. So this is the first step. We are reaching out to you, we are reaching out to the media, and we hope you take up this campaign in real earnest. So now we start with I will stand between you and our stellar panel. So each panelist would have about 7 minutes to speak, I think, 7 to 8 minutes. And our first speaker is Dr. Rakesh Kumar. He is Officer on Special Duty in the CSIR at New Delhi. Dr. Rakesh Kumar was Director of CSIR NITI, and now he's at the CSIR headquarters in New Delhi. He was awarded by the Trans-Asia Chamber of Commerce for Industries for environmental protection in 2017. He has 15 patents on pollution control devices. Of these, 3 are international patents, besides more than 170 papers in national and international journals. Dr. Rakesh Kumar. All right, so I won't, I'm told that the order of speakers is a little different from what is given in the printed program. Anyway, I have introduced Dr. Rakesh Kumar, and I will not introduce him again, but the first speaker is actually Mr. Richard Fuller. He is the founder and president of Pure Earth. He's an Australian-born, US-based engineer, entrepreneur, and environmentalist, best known for his work in global pollution remediation. In 2012, Richard convened the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution to scale up the global response to toxic pollution. Until date, he chairs the board of directors of Global Alliance on Health and Pollution. Richard was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia in recognition of his services to conservation and the environment in 2018. So, Richard, you have the floor for 7 to 8 minutes.
Can pull this up? Thank you. And then moving forward here. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming here. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really grateful to see people coming out and understanding more about lead and its exposure problems. I am the founder of Pure Earth, an organization based in New York City, but with offices around the world, one here in India growing rapidly, but another 20-odd countries where we operate, specifically being concerned about lead poisoning. And what I'd like to do is to give you the global picture of what's going on in lead around the world, and then turn it over to these absolute wonderful experts to talk about the specifics of what's occurring here in India. Again, our organization has been around since 1999, with offices here in Delhi in 2006. And we are a collaborative organization. We like providing solutions to governments and agencies around the world specific to this issue of lead poisoning. So, we are also the people behind this report that came out with UNICEF called Toxic Truth, which really looks at the scale of lead poisoning around the world. I had the pleasure of coming and presenting that to Dr. Kumar at NITI Aayog about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, yeah. And he convened a lot of secretaries and juniors and whatever from all of the different ministries and said, what do you all think about that? And they all went, oh, it can't be that bad. Let's study it ourselves. And commissioned then a report that came out from CSIR on this. And you all can get copies of it out in the foyer, which actually found that the information that I'll show to you right now is actually accurate, and lead in India is an enormous problem. It's not in India also. I show you this to show countries that are severely lead poisoned. India is in fact the worst of them all in terms of the gross number of people impacted, but you can see that a lot of the middle income countries have this issue amongst them. So let's talk about the numbers. The first critical number, 800 million children are currently lead poisoned globally. That's 1 in 3 children in the world actually are currently lead poisoned. In India, 275 million children, that's 1/2 of all the children under the age of 14, are currently lead poisoned. What happens is, having been poisoned at that age, the damage is actually permanent. So some of the implications of what I'll show you are things that are showing up for half of the population of India. I also want to show you and remind you that lead not only causes damage to the intellect for babies, it also causes heart disease. We often forget this, but lead exposures to adults causes a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease and premature death. So many, in fact, that in India, it's responsible for over 200,000 premature deaths a year. That's more than the number of people who die here from AIDS and HIV or from malaria. This is a bigger problem in terms of health in India right now than either of those two issues. Who would have thought? But let's talk about children again. What happens when you have this amount of lead in your blood when you're either in utero or in the first early years of development is it causes brain damage. There's no other way to describe it. As the brain is forming all of its connections, especially in the frontal cortex, and with lead present in the bloodstream, it displaces calcium. And rather than the connections occurring naturally and properly, they become inhibited. And you end up with a brain that, in animal studies, is about 2% smaller in size. But more important, the number of connections per neuron, it drops from about 10 or 15 per neuron down to 8 or 10 per neuron. So you end up with a brain that's not as well connected and not functioning as well as it should. And people who are lead poisoned at this level exhibit behavioral issues as a result. Obviously, of course, this damages intelligence. And there's an average loss for half of the population of India of 3 to 5 IQ points right now because of these lead exposures. Now, one person losing 5 IQ points, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. But when you take that at a population level, the implications can be really extraordinary. These two charts, I think, say it very well. This is an IQ graph of 100 million people at the top, with an average of 100 IQ points being the median. And then the number of people who are gifted, who will show up to Terry's seminars, are 6 million, above 130 IQ points. The number of people who need services from their families and the government, below 70 IQ points, again, is there. If that entire graph shifts to the left by 5 points, the intelligentsia is halved, goes from 6 million to 2.5 million. And the number of people who need services increases by 50%. And that's what's happening right now in India. The cost to society in lost entrepreneurship, in lost productivity, and the increased cost of having to look after more people who are disabled is simply extraordinary. There are other health impacts. I mentioned cardiovascular disease. There's also kidney disease. There's a significant increase in miscarriage and stillbirth, low birth weights associated with lead exposures. This toxin touches everything, and not in a good way. There is no safe level of lead. At the level that we're looking at, the implications are really substantial, but even at lower levels, there are costs to health associated with it. This last point I want to bring up is extraordinary. The frontal cortex that's damaged from these exposures is also the seat of self-control. It's the part of the brain that kicks in when all your drama is going on and you're angry or frightened or whatever. It's the piece that says, settle down, think, react, carefully. Don't be a fool. If that's damaged, people react worse. And on average, people with this amount of lead show twice the amount of violent crime than people without. And time again, all these graphs here, they show blood lead levels in one chart. I think it's the green and the red. And then 18 years later, violent crime statistics. And the 18-year shift is from those people damaged at birth to grow up, to be old enough to show up in crime registries. And once the lead comes out of those children, so too does violent crime reduce substantially by more than half when those kids grow up to be adults. So domestic violence is an issue here. We can deal with this here in India substantially just by managing a chemical. How extraordinary is that? Managing a chemical can reduce the amount of domestic violence, rape, murder, all these terrible things that we hear about so often here in India. We have that opportunity here. Now, I just want to also point out, we all think that lead was an issue in gasoline, and thank goodness it's gone. And that was the end of it. I think this was delightfully pointed out by Dr. Ghosh. It's not the case. In fact, these here are rates of lead exposures in India after gasoline going up. Whereas in the UK, you can see that the gasoline, after gasoline, the numbers decline precipitously. So we have a serious problem here. And I don't want to talk too much about what to do about this because we have such an august panel. But we know now from a range of different studies that the key sources of lead exposure, one is from bad, low-grade battery recycling. Another is from turmeric and other spices being adulterated. We're also finding lead in cookware, the least expensive aluminium cooking pots, saucepans. We're finding lead in them that when you put food in it, lead goes into the food and poisons children. This is a new, worrisome problem that needs a lot more research. That's a deep concern that may be impacting especially the poorest, because it's the poorest who buy the lowest grade aluminium pots. There is also lead in paint, and there is lead in cosmetics, as we've heard already. There's also lead in holy powders on holy days. Those things that are thrown in the air, they often are made of lead. What we do know is what is the variation of these different sources in terms of poisoning children. We only know right now one good study that we've completed in Bihar, which showed that in Bihar, half of the lead was coming from battery recycling, and half of it was coming from contaminated turmeric. Now, we're going to do this study in 3 or 4 more locations and see what shows up in other places. Is it the aluminum cookware? Is it more spices? Is it more of paint or other sources? Or is it all batteries? We'll find out as those work progresses. But we need to do this source analysis so we can be effective in spending scarce resources to deal with this issue. So that is a process that needs to happen on the way. Overall, there is a method to being able to deal with this problem at scale. It involves measuring people, doing surveillance work to know what their blood levels are, then doing that source analysis to determine where the sources are, and then conducting interventions to reduce those exposures out into the population. And the solutions, we've already had examples of success in several of these. I won't go into them too much, but the spices, there are successes in Bangladesh and Georgia that will be useful here. And in battery recycling, there is a process going on with a working group of all the key battery manufacturers and car OEM providers to really try and improve that sector in a substantial fashion. So there are ways forward with all of this that need addressing, that need to be sorted out as time goes on. So I will pause here and allow you all now to get much more detail and much more granular with the experts who understand what's happening here in more detail. And I thank you all for your time, and I'm very willing to chat with you all after the event, especially related to the global picture as it moves forward. Thank you all.
Richard, for this very enlightening overview of the problem of lead contamination and especially of the problem in India, the scale of the problem, the root of the problem, and the challenges ahead. And our next speaker is Dr. Rakesh Kumar, whom I have already introduced, and no doubt he will be speaking on the CSR, on the NITI study, which was commissioned by Dr. Rajiv Kumar.
So thank you again for having me here in this, I would say, a very, very special occasion. We are talking about a serious issue and also something which we did not discuss as much in detail. So I wanted to give a brief background how this whole study started. I have done my master's in engineering relating to environmental science and engineering at IIT Bombay. And that was the time we were all taught about heavy metal pollution. And in heavy metal, we counted lead, chromium, cadmium, nickel. That was a very standard way of learning it. But rarely we got a place where we could say this is the problem and which is a very serious problem. And when this matter was discussed in presence of Rajiv ji in your place and on some numbers which were also thrown to us that do we see this as a serious issue or not? I tell you that there can never be a study which is completely complete, and there can never be a study which can be probably called perfect study. But what comes out of this meta-analysis, I would call it, or secondary data-based analysis that we carried out with a few of my colleagues, points out that it's a serious issue that we are dealing with. And I'll take about 8-10 minutes as Dr. Ghosh has asked me to speak. So it's not that India alone is struggling with this. So whatever number that we are seeing right now, there are many other countries also struggling with this issue. And there are lead, and there are some places where we are talking about chromium, and some other places we are talking about more of mercury. But what is important here is that so specific prevalences which were known to us has been largely tackled. The issue is something which we thought source is fully understood, and we have fully tackled it. Now we are coming to know again afresh that those sources have still been contributing. So, for example, in case of lead phase out, which India should take pride in, that it phased out completely, and we could see with some BRC scientists in Mumbai and Delhi, there was a study which was carried out. We found that lead, which used to be so prevalent, and all the people in the roadside who used to stay had very high lead level in their body, now has come down to almost zero. So in India, we have regulated our gasoline-related lead. We have been able to do lead smelters largely. And there are many others which are coming from industry side. And Dr. T.K. Joshi will probably speak about how industry has been dealing with it as we go ahead. Now, all these attempts that we are making, it looks like we have progressed, but we also need to now deal with what new which is coming. So when we look at these sources, we have industries which are making PCBs, battery, nuclear power plant, antioxidants for oils, anti-vibration pads for building and machinery. So the sources of lead, which we will largely discuss today, and otherwise also we believe that is coming from lead acid battery, which is not the case. It's coming from many other industries. It's not only one center that we are talking about. And as Richard also pointed out, household products that we have, starting with face wash, face masks, hair oils, there are a lot of such things. And I didn't want to add here, specifically some Ayurvedic medicines also have very high level of lead. And in terms of Ayurveda, it is believed that in certain form of lead, it is effective, which I'm not an expert to make a comment on this. But what is coming out in a diffuse pattern across India is relating to recycling activities, which we should take pride in, because we have been able to bring jobs, we have been able to bring economics back to us when we do recycling, whether we call it lead related, zinc related, or anything else. But all of these recycling activities are actually getting diffused, and it is going to the population in certain hotspots which we are probably not aware of. And some of the data points which came in the report, which was UNICEF and Pure Earth, actually pointed that out to us. When we looked at this report, which you all can read later on, but I just wanted to point out few important data points. It looks like there are certain states where we know where the hotspots are. The numbers are looking alarming, and as you can see in Bihar, the areas that has been studied, it shows alarmingly high, which should be ideally below 5, but here we are in the range of about 10. But there are many other states, as you can see, including a state like Arunachal Pradesh, which we believe is one of the cleanest state from all angles. Hardly any, I would say, polluting activity which takes place in that state. So when we look at certain data pointers across our country, we understand that automotive, battery, and railway sectors utilize about 70% of lead. We have two big companies, and there are many smaller companies who are producing lead across 65,000 metric ton of lead production from just Hindustan Zinc, and India Lead Limited is another 28,000. These numbers keep varying, but these are the numbers which were valid till 2018-19 or so. It also shows that industrial lead application in India has surpassed about 81,000 metric ton. And some of these numbers, when we say, has also its implication that all of these data points are not that each of these 81,000 metric ton would go into a formal sector. Most of them will actually end in informal sector. So when we look at some of these data, which we have also seen that lead concentration in the blood of users of cosmetics, many places, as was pointed out earlier, goes as high as 13 microgram per deciliter. And in some non-users who are not using so much, also have very high concentration, because this is so ubiquitous, it is so prevalent that is somehow coming into our system and is getting affected. Some of the other studies also shows that lead accumulates. It has tendency to bioaccumulate in plant, animals, microbes, and other species. And as we live in the same system, so directly or indirectly, when we consume, we also accumulate in our own system. When we look at marine food chain, there has been a paper by Pandey and Madhuri. They have talked about marine ecosystem. Also, we have very high concentration that we are encountering now. When we look at overall picture, it looks like most of the lead worldwide is actually being used in lead acid batteries, which is very easy to recycle, and therefore you see not a lot of informal sector is busy into doing these kind of recycling. In our case, particularly when we talk about India, around 31% of household paints in India had lead concentration of more than 10,000 ppm, whereas the lead limit was about 90 ppm. The good news now is that all regulated good paint manufacturers have much lower lead levels now, and in many of them are now claiming that they have a complete product line which is lead free. So there's a lot of good things which are happening. Fortunately, other things is also true that all Indians don't paint their houses inside so much. Mostly they use lime to paint. Only those who are rich enough, they use this good quality paints. When we look at exposure of lead through environment, as I also pointed out already, it actually goes through all processes. So it goes into our human body through air. It goes also through ingestion and also through normal food chain that we are used to, and then we are experiencing it. So when we look at all our sources, particularly water bodies from where we take water, and those who consume anything which is grown in water, they will get in their system air that we breathe, and anything that gets accumulated and we are using it, that also comes back if it is being sourced from the soil which is contaminated. So I'll not go into details. Richard has already talked about it. What is important here to understand is that some of these which are highlighted, particularly glass manufacturing, automobile repair, ceramic work, painting, making pottery and smelting, these are the ones which are looking like as an occupational area where the lead contamination is showing as signs very, very distinctly. On the non-occupational side, as we discussed, use of cosmetic and sindoors, household storage batteries, the one which are in formal sector, absolutely no issues, but the one which we are using now every day, household batteries, household paints, lead contaminated spices. We all believed when we were growing up that all the contamination of turmeric will not be there as we go ahead, but now it is coming back very strongly as people like to have colored, vegetables and spices. And then, of course, lead contaminated soil, dust, and water, which comes all of that together. So when we move forward in this direction, just one second. So what we did, all of that data which was available in public domain, published by Indian researcher across various research papers. So this was an exercise, and I wanted to highlight here. The slide is a bit busy slide. Pardon me for that, but it actually tries to communicate the complexity of assessment. That and how that complexity was actually sorted out is what has been simplified in the next slide here. Then when we're looking at this whole data sets, which were actually created and generated by Indian researchers, we looked at first exposure data collection and collation. So all of that was put together. Then we created fitting ensemble distribution of micro data, and then all of these data of blood levels were analyzed based on demographic, age, sex, and other parameters. After that, exposure estimations were looked at, spatial, temporal, Gaussian process regression. And on that basis, blood lead levels distribution was estimated. After that, relative risks were calculated on the basis of cumulative blood lead level index. And using those conversion factor, we could figure it out what is the blood lead levels which are likely to be distributed amongst the population. Using that, as we move forward, we looked at what kind of calculating shift in IQ levels and systolic blood pressure level data that has been also put together. And then again, attribute all of these fraction with risk related, cause, age, sex, and other parameters. And using all of these, final burden of estimation was done. So this whole exercise, which to us also, the team which worked on it, we were a bit frightened in terms of the kind of data, because data was not from one single source. It was coming from multiple sources. It was coming from different time period. It was coming from different areas, demographic areas. And all of that was collated and then computed together. And when we look at these were all calculated in terms of YLL, which is years of life lost due to premature mortality. YLD is another term which is used, years of healthy life lost due to disability, due to ill health. And then finally convert all of these into disability adjusted life year. So all of that has been, put that in the report. At the end, I would basically try to share with you that there are now strong pointers that we need to do something about it. And there are few places which we know for sure that things are very serious. There are other areas which we are probably not very sure, but we are doubtful that things are not being accounted for. So our inventory as such is still not very robust enough, and across India, if you have to say, where lead comes, where it goes, how it gets used, and finally how it's getting disposed of. So we need to look at disease prevalence and burden estimation. This data is already there in place. Now we need to look at more of source identification and look at how their future operation is going to be, and look at children specifically. And we should start doing very close surveillance through education, clinical examination, and rehabilitation, because they are the ones when they grow up, as Richard also pointed out, they are the ones who are going to be the person responsible for growth of the country or the otherwise. And if they are not taken care of now, we will have trouble as we go ahead. One thing which has come out very clearly based on our own analysis is that only regulatory system will not help. Regulatory system is required. It needs to become more robust. We do have battery management based rules, but as I said, lead acid battery is one of the sources. There are many other sources which are also coming in. So we need local level and NGOs and public participation to help this process, to identify where the issues are. And then lastly, I would say that small scale industry, which are actually the, I would say, the real lifeline of providing jobs in our country, they need to be supported with innovation and research. Frankly speaking, in this forum, I can say that even scientists at CSIR, they do not normally want to go and do research at, which looks small level research. But that is where the major difference of, I would say, economic activity happens. So when we are talking about lead acid batteries, if they, or smaller smelters or the furnaces that they are using, what is the innovation that we can do that the operators are not exposed to in terms of their own health, as well as those who do primary sourcing as well as distribution. So we need to do some kind of mission mode exercise in this case. And after that, also educate them, because those are the people who actually work in informal sector, and I'm using this word informal, but otherwise they are called illegal sector completely. They are not part of the system. So how do we communicate to them? Our experience of some of my PhD students who work on recycling industries, the moment they say we are doing research and from so and so organization, they'll simply shut off and not give any information. But if we become part of their system, they start sharing this information. So it is important, as I wanted to conclude here, that country level primary assessment is something which is needed. This data alone is sufficient to take concrete steps, but we need to do primary assessment. And then some of the hotspots are known to us. Some of the areas of concern is known to us. Let's start addressing those issues. And the second very important thing is the supply chain. Who takes it, from where it goes, and how it gets addressed. That is not very well understood. Some people in informal sector know who does it, but it's very important to understand the whole supply chain, transportation, manufacturing, and distribution. And there are many other areas which we will, as we go ahead, we'll discuss. At the end, I would like to thank Rajiv ji for taking his interest. Otherwise, it's very rare to see somebody at his position to be taking interest. In my opinion, it was looking like an abstract data and points. And Dr. Karti and his teams, IHME scientists and researchers. We had reviewers, Dr. B. Sen Gupta, Dr. Meena Sehgal from TERI, Dr. Rajiv, who is an industry expert, and Dr. Sarif, who is from EMS, and all our CSR colleagues who were part of preparing this document. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh Kumar, for giving us this presentation of a landmark study on lead contamination in India, lead pollution, and the impacts. And this research is indeed conducted in a very rigorous manner. And we certainly hope that the original research papers would be available to a broader audience, and that the results of this research would be appropriately conveyed to the media for raising awareness, among the general public and among the policymakers. And of course, you have adverted to the difficulties. You have adverted to the difficulties in addressing the problem, which stem from the fact that largely the problem is that of the informal sector. You called it the legal sector. I wish I hadn't called it that, but maybe non-legal might be a better expression. But anyway, so that, addressing the regulatory issues of the informal sector is indeed a very important policy challenge. And I don't think really we have addressed the question of, we have been able to effectively address the question of regulation of the informal sector in any meaningful sense. Our next speaker is Dr. Thupil Venkatesh. He is Professor Emeritus at St. John's Medical College, Bangalore. He is the lead principal assessor for the NABL and NABH under Quality Council of India. He is the CEO and director of the Foundation for Quality India and the director of the National Referral Center for Lead Projects in India. He is also technical advisor to UNIDO and WHO. He has published over 350 scientific papers in peer-reviewed journals.
You just have to move.
So, Dr. Venkatesh, you have the floor for 7 to 8 minutes.
I'm given 10 minutes time to share
the distilled, extracted information of some 30, 40 years of work. I know how difficult it is. Before any statement, I would like to tell you, which is in Sanskrit, I will translate it. Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, na bruyat asatyam priyam. What it means, I'll speak out the truth. I'll speak out what pleases you. I shall not speak out untruth, even if it pleases you, or truth which is not acceptable. With reference to lead. Do you know every one of you have reached this place on time thanks to lead? Can I say that? But for your car battery, you would not have reached. You would have put any amount of petrol. Number two, thanks to lead, you know, our friends are holding, ladies and gentlemen, pencils in your hand, coated with lead, lead containing paint. Have you ever put it in your mouth in your lifetime? Of course. Go to school, every child will be chewing. Why should we make pencils painted with lead containing paint? Who is the culprit? Lead or we? We are the culprit. Why do you blame lead? Because when I walked in, a friend of mine asked me, sir, do you have the list of unorganized sector of lead industry? I said, if I had the list, that would have been organized sector. Am I right? Because I don't know where they are. Who permitted them? We permitted them. Why? We want them. Why? Poverty is the opportunity for business. Otherwise, developed countries would not have dumped all the waste material into this country or neighboring countries, developing countries, because people are poor. They do any kind of job, causing environmental poison. Therefore, I would like to, taking the guide from previous speakers, they have told us enough information. Every one of you know what is that we have to do now. That is a challenge. If something is possible, I will do it. I don't need anybody's help. If something is impossible, let us work together. Let us make it happen. Therefore, number one, environmental hazard, poison. No doubt, it's number one, environmental. Because we throw it into the environment, then it becomes poison. Till that time, lead in the battery is the safest form of lead. I have UPS at home. I have not died. My grandchild has not died. Our blood lead level is below 3 microgram per deciliter in spite of having UPS. Why should I blame that? Come on, decide, take a decision. 1 year, you will not use lead acid battery. Possible? You will never paint your house. Possible? Main cause is poverty affecting vulnerable group. Vulnerable group is women in reproductive age. I can eat some lead, nothing happens to me, my IQ will not come down. It's saturated. But children, during growth and development, we have to take care of them. If we don't take care of them, again blame the lead, because we have allowed the children to get exposed. Turmeric powder adulterated with lead chromate. You mentioned, someone of you mentioned about spices also. Yes, very tasty sambar, tasty rasam from South India. We have taken the turmeric powder. You know what happened to Maggi issue? The small masala packet had lead in that, lead chromate. We added that, blame lead. Lack of biomonitoring data for scientific studies. We have sporadic studies. Do we have cohort studies? In Delhi itself, can we have a data on different areas? Do we have a lead map of one area in this country or in any developing country? Air lead level, soil lead level, food lead level, milk lead level, blood lead level, have we correlated? We have not done it. But just cleaning the environment will not help. We have to correlate and look at the final solution. We cannot have lead-free society. We can have lead-safe society. Do we have a mechanism to monitor, control, and review the outcome? This is the responsibility of we educated people. Unorganized sector, this boy, the little boy in the left bottom corner, at the age of 10, died overnight with abdominal colic. I took this picture. I wanted to adopt that boy. And when I went to Delhi in Chandni Chowk area, the boy was no longer there. He had no parents. He was working with his uncle. And one night, he explained colic pain. By the time they postponed his taking him to the doctor, and he died. He died. Myself and my wife, we lost one child. Therefore, we need implementable policies developed by all concerned parties, all stakeholders. Have we involved in while developing policy in any of these developing countries, the partners, have we taken them into confidence? We only go to them, inspect and penalize them. Should we not involve them while making policy? Okay, our average blood lead level is around 10 to 12 microgram per deciliter. We want to bring it down to below 3 microgram per deciliter. To do that, whom all we have concerned? Can we decide within 4 of us, 5, 6 of us? Should we not get them? Implementable policies is what is required in developing countries. Developed countries are excellent model for us. We have invented wheel. Why not we? Why should we reinvent wheel? Gradual time-bound implementation is possible, not overnight implementation. I cannot expect India, Pakistan. I had been there to talk about the surma containing lead. In India, I used to ask people, are you dying or dying? Hair dyes. I don't know why they want to look young to please somebody. I used to ask. Every one of us, we are aware of this. What is our contribution? We wait for regulators to come and regulate. We want ministry to come and regulate. Why not we have self-regulation? Mechanism to monitor, control, review, outcome again is one of the most important things. In fact, what is required? Massive awareness, public awareness. One of you mentioned it. I would like to thank you very much. Have we ever created an awareness in the area where we live? Let us think globally, but we need to act locally. Then only things will happen. How many of us have created awareness to our neighbors' children, that using some of these toys are toxic toys containing lead, cadmium, mercury, and many other things? And how many of us know our blood lead level here? Can you raise your hands? Do you know your blood lead level? Why? Why you did not get your blood lead level done? You don't know where it can be done. Have we created facilities? For the whole country, I tell you, Pramila was struggling to find some organization to screen children in Vellore for the blood lead level in an orphanage, which is next to one of the abandoned recycler. Finally, she contacted me. I said, okay, we'll help you. We'll do that. We have only 47 centers in the country, whole country, 1.3 billion. 47 centers. It doesn't cost much. It costs 1.8 lakhs to get one machine and something like 500 rupees per test. If government can only waive the duty and excise on the import of these things, probably we can bring down the cost to 200 rupees per sample. Eventually, government will be benefited. If we can protect the IQ of a child, 53.8% of children having blood lead level above 12 microgram per deciliter today, they are going to cause very huge economic damage in our country in next few years to come when they become human productivity. To do 4 hours work, they will take 8 hours. Just because we stopped adding tetraethyl lead to gasoline, we have not solved the problem. It is not lead-free petrol, it's unleaded petrol. We have cultural, religious practices in this country. Body painting during Dashara. Dashara is just over. If you had come few days earlier, I would have taken you to some places where they paint their body, and I tell you, just for sake of earning little money for their food. And when their blood level goes up with renal problem or neuromuscular problem, they come to the hospital. They come to our hospital. You know, the cost of one cycle of lead, removing lead, chelating lead, is around 2,000 rupees. How can they afford to pay? We have to look at the practicality. We have the knowledge. Have we made efforts to educate our community, our society? We got XRF gifted to me. We went to parks, measured the lead content of the lead. I tell you, yellow paint, which all school buses were painted, has the highest amount of lead, 40,000 parts per million. We, in fact, thanks to Dr. Rana, who is here during our QCI time, we constituted a committee. I was the chairman to invite all the lead paint manufacturers, asking them, can you make paints with a lead content below 90 ppm? They said, not possible, sir, because technology we don't have. I said, 9%, 91% of market share of your paints are leaded paints. 9% is lead safe paint. To Singapore, you have the technology. Then I had to tell them, look, in between four walls, I'm telling you, government has decided to import lead safe paint from other countries without duty and custom, and they are going to make it available to our population at a price lower than your paint. I don't want our industry to shut down. Next week, they all came forward saying that we will manufacture. They did it. Gazette notification came out. I tell you, cosmetics. Ladies, don't use lipsticks unless you know what is the lead content in the lipstick. Ladies, don't use cosmetics without knowing what it contains. We are all educated. Unless we educate ourselves, we cannot educate somebody else. Lead is not a poison unless it gets into your system. We become ignorant, indifferent. That's why lead gets into our system. Why blame lead unnecessarily? We can still create lead-safe environment. May not be lead-free environment. We have thrown lead, enough lead into our environment. What we need to do, let us all developing countries together take a decision step by step. I have 10 commandments how to bring down the lead content in the environment, how to bring down the lead content of our blood. Implementable, economically feasible, think globally, act locally. In fact, I would like to share those things. One of the challenges to achieve the global standard for blood lead level of below 2 microgram per deciliter, because even at 2 microgram per deciliter, I tell you, it can bring about DNA aberration. We can prevent it. The only population which has lead level below 2 microgram per deciliter, they are the tribals in Andaman Nicobar, Jarwas and Inkas. They don't have lead in their blood. If we go there, give them some battery power backup, the buttons which are cold loaded with lead and tires which are loaded with lead sulfate, their lead level also goes up. Therefore, from lead free, which is not possible, let us move towards lead safe environment, where schools, hospitals, where playgrounds are there, let it be lead safe environment so that we can protect our children. Lead, thank you. I'm not thanking you, I'm thanking lead for bringing us together so that together we can make a change. My guru is here, Puglandi. Every time he calls me, sir, you speak well, come and just walk in India Lead Zinc Association conferences. I tell you, that's where he motivated me to be very friendly with lead. When you are friendly with your enemy, that enemy will not damage, will not hurt you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Venkatesh, for this very enlightening and, if I may say, stirring, discourse, which has pointed out the way forward to move from not a lead-free but a lead-safe world. Thank you very much indeed. And our next speaker is Dr. Rajiv Kumar. Well, Dr. Rajiv Kumar is the former Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, and he has various other positions. And what is not mentioned in this resume is that he was a senior economist at the Asian Development Bank, where we were colleagues.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pradeep. Thank you so much, and good afternoon to all those in the dais and friends here in the audience. And I think enough has been said and enough passion has been now aroused about lead. And I wonder, wow, if there's anything left to say actually for me. But having commissioned that study and having challenged NITI and Pure Earth to actually produce the evidence for our country, I thought that would suffice to take the ball forward, to get it into policy making, etc. And I noticed even within NITI when I was there until the end of April, and afterwards also, unfortunately, not much had moved. And I'm not sure. Whose glasses are these? Dr. Venkatesh has been at this for some time, because I think I remember having heard him before earlier also, and with equal amount of passion and and persuasion. And I have asked myself the question as to why does this not move forward? After all, the figures, the data that Richard put out, that NIRI report has put out, shows clearly that we are in trouble with our children. And I have, by the way, been a very passionate supporter. Well, I've actually tried to do things about our children's malnourishment. 38%, etc. And I've said that this is probably the most important problem, because if we let a third of our children not be nourished properly so that their neurons even doesn't get developed from the age of 1 to 3, and this adds on to that, that if you are malnourished and then you get lead poisoning, that means probably the expected demographic dividend will not occur, because the children's intellectual capability would not be there as they grow up. Then the question is that you have to ask ourselves, why doesn't anything happen, in our country? I mean, this is clearly, these facts are known. And I think I've scratched my head, and I find that it's for two reasons, I think. One, that's my hypothesis for you, is one that this problem exists in the informal sector, under the radar. It doesn't, it's not the high corporates, not all of them are accepted, etc. Even your haldi or your sindoor or your kumkum is all produced by the unorganized sector. After all, FSSAI has a norm about what the turmeric should be like. But the fact is that 80% or some very large percentage of our turmeric is sold without that FSSAI seal. And that's where the lead is there. So why does that happen? And that happens because of the informality, which by definition means that rules don't apply. And when rules don't apply and other things apply, and which is primarily rent seeking in our country. And if there is enough rent seeking and then rents to be generated, and somehow the license, and there are plenty of that, then you can take care of whatever you can, and it goes on. So that's the supply side of it, and which is why it doesn't happen. And that's because it's and even the battery recycling, whatever you saw, all those sort of sources of lead poisoning, a great majority is in the informal sector, below the regulatory radar, below, therefore left open to all the all the sort of all the ills of the rent-seeking regime that you have in our society, in our country. So that's one side. On the demand side, I think it is again a similar problem that happens all over, across all so many things, is that it doesn't affect the elite. It doesn't, lead poisoning doesn't affect the children of the elite, and especially not to the measure that it causes the sort of, the damage, as it were, in terms of dropping of IQ points of 3 to 5%. In any case, and the graph that Richard showed, that if you get above 5%, you get you get half of the gifted children, from 6 million to 2.5 million, or you get that much more burden of the underdeveloped child. The elite, we all sitting here, are not affected by that. And as always, and I say this with heavy heart and with due recognition of that it includes me, is that in most cases, the Indian elite has abdicated its responsibility. And that's the responsibility to you, Dr. Venkatesh, which is that, you say as to why this is not happening. This is why it's not happening. It doesn't concern you and me, it doesn't concern everybody here. So we are quiet, and, things go on and have gone on and will carry on, I'm afraid, because there is no way that you can push this agenda forward, either in the policy making. So you can't get it up there in the priority list of the policy makers, which is what I tried from NITI Aayog. And I must confess to you, I didn't succeed. And nor in the society, because the vocal, the 20% or the 2%, whichever you like to call it, is not affected by it. So, is there a way forward for this? Is there some way out of it? And that's what we need to put our heads together, because yes, we have to be practical, and we now need to and not theoretical. Now, so therefore, there are one of the things, two practical things that I can talk about is that one, if all of us, Terry, I have now got a think tank called Pehle India Foundation, or ICRIER, or whoever works on health, Bill and Melinda Gates, etc. They can get after one of the sources, which is turmeric, and get the FSSAI to do it. Now, it's a focused intervention, and we can try and do it. We can do it, and so on. And one of the learning that I've got from 5 years of NITI Aayog is that you've got to do it at the state level. Even the regulatory implementation will not happen in Delhi. It will have to happen in the states with the regional language, with the vernacular press, with the local bureaucracy. And only then would you be able to achieve it. So choose one of those, choose that, choose your trees if you like, and get them to implement whatever the norms are, whatever the BIS norms are. Shocking, huh? 90 particles per gram, ppm, is the BIS norm, and 31% have more than 10,000. I mean, incredible. That's something. So the laws exist. I mean, just like the Anti-Dowry Act exists in this country, and we know what happens to it. These are all implementational issues, and we've got to devise, therefore, a strategy for implementing it. One of the things, as I said, choose one or two things that we think are doable. Haldi is one. And the second one, as I said, I thought would be the bringing down of the excise duties that Dr. Venkatesh talked about. I think we should try and advocate for that, because if the cost of the tests come down, at least the awareness will go up. So that's a two-point agenda for us to take from here on how to do this. The other thought is that there are two ways for this to somebody mentioned about having a mission mode. I think, Rakesh, you mentioned mission mode. How to make this into a mission? Now, there are two ways out of that. One way is, and Karti and I have discussed this, one way is to do what Swachh Bharat has done, which is to get the Prime Minister, the top political leadership, and say, look, this is bad, and let's get a mission. There, I tried that, and in NITI Aayog, problem happens is that you don't know which ministry to have this. Where will it fall? Normally, it falls between the stools, and most often than not, more than one ministry doesn't like to work with each other. So that's the other issue. But maybe that's the way forward. Maybe somebody can raise it to the attention of the Prime Minister repeatedly, and therefore can be done. But the other issue, which I thought mentioned here, and which is what I believe in, is to raise the social awareness, which is what we sitting here can do. And us can take responsibility of saying that we will write an article a week or an article a fortnight, not in English, because that's just 10% of our people, but the other languages, we will write those pieces every week after week after week. And that, I think, will make sure that lead comes up in the visibility index and comes up in the state leadership. Otherwise, at the moment, believe you me, it is not a priority anywhere. Neither in the health ministry, nor in the environment ministry, nor in the state governments, nor in the political system, nowhere. And we'll keep talking about it. So those are the two alternatives at the bigger level. We can decide what we want to do with it. And those are the two focused suggestions that I had. But it's clear that, this, just like the stigma of having one of the largest populations of malnourished children in our country, this is another stigma that we need to get rid of. And the sooner we do it, the better. And once more to repeat, and therefore to tell myself that it is us, the elite, which will be responsible for it, or, as usual, abdicate our responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, for this very wide-ranging statement, which covers the political economy of lead regulation, political economy of actually the informal sector regulation, and pointing to the difficulties in addressing this issue. We have to look at different ministries, look at different line departments in the states. We have involved the state governments. And of course, the point is that it doesn't really affect the elite. And the people whom it does affect, they don't know that it affects them. If they knew that it affects them, then perhaps they would speak with their votes at the ballot box. And that doesn't happen. And of course, it's up to those of us who have, who have access to the media, to the vernacular media, to bring about this, this enhancement of attention, in the Indian public. Our final speaker is Dr. T.K. Joshi. He is Technical Advisor, UNOPS India. So Dr. Joshi, you have the floor.
So I will put your
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. And I must congratulate Pure Earth and Terry for organizing this event. In fact, like Dr. Venkatesh said, that to talk about something that we have been working on for the last 30 years in 10 minutes is very, very difficult and tall order. 3 points which I think which have been missed out, I will try to highlight those. We did a study with Terry, we are partner. This was the first study done on electronic waste recycling workers. And in that study, we found that the people, the workers who were there, they had very high lead levels. I show you the slide. So I think we have talked about the lead acid batteries, cosmetics, so many things. But the e-waste recycling is emerging the next most important issue, which is leading to soil contamination, water contamination. And unfortunate part, Dr. Rajiv Kumar said, and I think Mr. Rajiv Kumar also mentioned, I must have visited thousands of factories, big, small. I was advising Vedanta, the lead smelter in Rasamand, Rajasthan. There is a phenomena, most of you must have heard about the occupational disease, environmental disease, but I am quite sure most of you may not have heard about the para-occupational diseases. And this is what is happening in India, that in informal sector, small and medium industries, the workers, they go back home wearing the same clothes. And they are transferring the lead dust from the workplace to the home, exposing the entire family. And that is what the para-occupational disease is. That if there's not the family, I had a case in my hospital of a lady who suffered from mesothelioma, a mark of asbestos. And we questioned her. She said, I have never walked out of my house. And then we discovered that it's a husband who was working in an asbestos factory, and he was bringing the asbestos fibers to home, which caused the disease in that woman. So the second point that I would like to highlight is that we have heard and we have seen the blood lead levels, all we have heard. Blood lead level only tells about the exposure. It does not tell about disease. And that is where we lack. And there is so much of profound ignorance even amongst the top clinicians that lead poisoning, it could be lead poisoning occurs to them at the last. I remember Dr. Veena Kalra was the professor and head of pediatrics in AIMS. And she one day phoned me that I have a child who had convulsions. And as usual, the pediatrician was thinking of rare syndromes, and he was mildly febrile. And they did all the MRI, CAT scanning on them. No result, no clue. Ultimately, when they questioned the mother of the child, she said, I don't work, but my husband brings something in, at home. He burns it and puts it in fire. And there is a place in Samaipur, Bagli in Delhi, yet outskirts, lead acid battery recycling was a cottage industry there. And that the AIMS did a survey, found everyone had very high lead levels. So even in the AIMS, it occurred to them at the last. And I remember another case of my colleague in Berkeley University Hospital, because I studied in West Coast in UCSF. So she sent me a mail that I have an Indian worker with us, profoundly ill, admitted to my ICU. She was an internist. She was a doctor, physician trained in US. And she said he had abdominal pain. He was having loss of appetite, and he was constipation, and we couldn't find. So I referred him to the gastroenterologist. He did an endoscopy. We had no clue. Ultimately, we sat down, and then somebody said, "Could it be lead?" So we had his lead measured, 60 micrograms. They chelated him, but the question is from where the lead came. The US has a very good system. They will send a team to your house, we collect samples, dust samples, paint samples, water sample, food. Everything was done, no clue. Again, the question, the occupation was ruled out as a source of lead. So ultimately, he was an immigrant worker, traveled from Chandigarh to East Coast, New York, and then didn't find a job, ended up in the West Coast. So he said that when I was leaving India, people told me US healthcare is terribly expensive. You take some medicines. So some indigenous doctor gave me some powder. So they said, bring that powder. And they analyzed the powder. It was full of lead. And I was once in the lab, as Dr. Rakesh Kumar has rightly mentioned, I was once in lab, our food and drug testing lab in Mumbai. So they have an Ayurvedic section where they test all the Ayurvedic medicines. I'm not blaming, I'm not casting aspersions. So I just talked to the in charge. I said, do you sometimes get these Ayurvedic medicines to analyze them? He said, I have right now a powder which has 40% lead. So I think these are the issues that we have to face. I'll quickly run through my slides, just some important ones. But lead is actually non-essential metal. It doesn't serve any purpose in the body. And as a metal, as Dr. Venkatesh said, it will outlive us. It can't be created and it can't be destroyed. And it is an ancient poison, we all know. Lead acetate has been used. I remember when I was doing my medicine in England, our professor used to tell me that lead was used extensively in England for sweetening the candies. And these are it's a 5,000-year-old story, and it has been there known for a long time. And yet in the best of hospitals, we are not able to diagnose, and it comes last over mind. Now, the third point I think I might say that lead somehow or other in India is an urban phenomenon. With Terry, we did another study. This was Terry got some fund from EU, and they collected the vegetables. I think it was mentioned vegetables from Yamuna Basin in Delhi, and another comparative state. They chose Vallabhgarh, which is a remote rural area. So when they did, they found very high lead levels in the vegetables. So all of you are taking vegetables full of lead. So then they came to me, said, what next? I said, let us see if the people are getting their blood. So we had the blood lead measurements made, and there were high lead levels in Delhi, 40, 50 micrograms. But in Vallabhgarh, there was hardly 1 to 2 micrograms. And we did some studies in Rajasthan and Pali district, where there are 3,000 dying units. Again, 1 to 2. So mainly in India, it's a urban phenomena. Secondly, the unique thing about India is that the poorest, the poor in the world, they suffer from the lead poisoning. But India, poorest of the poor, they are not the victims. It is the low income or low middle income and middle income who suffer. And that is a very pioneering study done at Nagpur by our colleague Archana Patel with Harvard University, that the principal source of this lead was surma. Because surma had very highly contaminated with lead, and through mucosa, it went to the children. So in India, whereas in the world, the most poor children have high lead levels, in India, poorest of the poor can't afford paint. So they can't have the high lead levels. And yeah, so this is the study which we did with Terry. This is the e-waste recycling workers. If you see where there are spikes, where lead levels are high, the age group is around 20 years. So it is the younger ones who always retain lead higher than compared to the adults. And it is a WHO has made so many statements. The WHO says that there is no safe lead exposure level. Any even 1 micrograms could have deleterious effect. And 1% of disease burden, which is a lot in absolute terms, is attributable to the lead exposure. Well, I will skip the absorption part, but this is another fourth thing which I have found. 20 years back when I was visiting electronic factory, if you see the circuit printed circuit board of your computer or TV, you find dots. These are all lead soldiers. And I see with the rows of women, they were doing this job and they were all having raised lead levels. So thankfully, this has been now done away with, and many of these electronic industry, they are using solder, which is lead free. So that has been a good development. Now, as far as confirmation of lead, Dr. Venkatesh has done a lot of surveys. We have done ourselves a lot of surveys. Blood lead still remains the gold standard, but there are other things being tried. I mean, plasma is actually a better indicator, but there are difficulty. So you can measure lead in saliva, in hairs, in urinary, in nail and bone and lead. I remember when I was at London School of Hygiene doing my master's, there was an African lady who was doing her PhD measuring lead in the sweat. All these things have not paid dividends. So far, the bone lead, actually, there is a new method, XRF, X-ray fluorescence, and they are in the US, it is being done frequently, L and K X-ray fluorescence. But unfortunately, where we need, when you do on children, you have to sedate them, and that's the difficulty. And there's a provocation test. Of course, this is we do by giving chelating agent, but that can only be done in very highly specialized units. So far, I think the blood lead remains the body standard, but the problem is the blood lead, one single reading doesn't tell you much unless you do a series of measurements. This gives you just a recent exposure. So I would just say that these three things, they are the red ones, they form the lead triad. And this case of University of Berkeley, I told you that this was a classical thing and yet they missed. So many about health implications. I think a lot has been said. Lead affects every organ of the body, but the problem is that the neurological damage are irreversible. They can't be changed. So I would say that in conclusion, the lead is a major issue in India, and we have no data on disease burden. We have a lot of data on the lead levels, but we have to now work a little more diligently to create lead. We have done an air pollution issue, but lead still remains untapped. So I think it's the children, their future. And this is a question I put to my students when I asked them that why did government remove lead from the petrol and put alkyl benzenes where benzene is a carcinogen and lead is not a class 1 carcinogen? No doctor has been able to answer this. The simple reason was the lead was removed from the fuel because we would have destroyed the intellect of our entire generation. So the toxicity are mainly, this is entirely preventable thing. Entirely if there is a desire and commitment from the top. At our level, we have done whatever we can. The only success that we have achieved is reducing the lead content of the paint from, it used to be 10,000. Now it is at least down to 90 ppm, but how much it is being followed, we just don't know. So we did a national program. We have been calling for a long time that there should be an ongoing lead surveillance program of children at least, if not all, then maybe in the urban areas, as in US, because US, that can show you the results of intervention, that can show you the result of policy. And US has been be able to show that earlier when the lead levels were 20, 30 micrograms, they are now down to 2 micrograms as a result of this intervention. So I think that we need a national program, covering the entire problem if you want to save our children. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joshi, for this, very wide-ranging presentation on, the medical aspects of lead and you have gone into great detail. You mentioned about that we don't know the burden of disease, but I think Dr. Rakesh Kumar's research gives us some fairly good pointers to the overall burden of disease when it comes to lead contamination in India. So now we come to the conclusion of this panel discussion, accepting that we can invite Q&A,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So
So it's in hybrid mode. So we request all the participants who have joined online to drop your question on the chat box, and who are physically present can raise their voice and
Yeah.
put up the question directly to the
So we are merging the audience interaction with the media interaction because of shortage of time. So whether you are a media person or a commoner, you are perfectly welcome to to raise your question. It has to be a question. It cannot be a speech. And please, stand up, identify yourself, identify your affiliation, and address your question to one or the other of the panel speakers, not the moderator. Okay? So the floor is open. No question. Okay, this gentleman in the mob shirt. I know what mob is. Yeah.
So as you said, so let's start with the question. I'm Dr. Vivek Kumar. I'm a postgraduate at University College of Medical Sciences, Delhi. So my question is, and I've even posted in the registration link that was provided to us, all these talks somehow fuel only one thing, that, okay, something has to be done. And I'm really thankful to Sir Venkatesh that you have pointed very good points and to actually instill that thing. So my question is, how do we actually surpass the wash-off effect of finance when it comes into play? For example, you've been talking about lead all this time, coal mining, weapons, armory, they also contain lead and they have wreaked havoc. Recently, some mine was very infamous in terms of its pollution and environmental effects. I just asked the question how to actually surpass when finance comes into play into geopolitical, economics, and affairs. Everything gets washed off. All these efforts get washed off. All those talks hold no importance when money comes into play, and our politicians seem to drink that leaden drinks every day because their intellect, I think, gets destroyed.
Yeah, they are really lead impacted, but I still haven't got your question. And
the question is, sir, how, as a common person, if I can say, how do we actually ensure that what we speak gets done? Only writing won't take it to that level, sir.
What you're saying is, how do we address the problem of lead contamination, and whom is this question addressed to?
So this question is addressed to everyone present here.
No, it has to be one person.
If I have to choose one, I think I'll go with Sir Venkatesh to answer this question.
Sir Venkatesh, you have the floor.
See, in any industry, there is an environmental health and safety officer. Safety, health, environmental officer, SHE, she is the mother. He is supposed to keep track of the health of their employees by regular monitoring, at least annual health checkup. Wherever there is a possibility of them getting exposed to lead, blood lead monitoring is a mandatory thing. It is not required in other industries. Wherever there is a possibility of getting exposed to lead in their work environment, like coal industry in Dhanbad and other areas, they have to have facilities created by the industry to monitor their blood lead level. Not only their blood lead level, they carry dust home, their family members also. This is not being done. It is the requirement of a regulation which should be communicated to the industry. Industry should put it into practice, have a data on the day of inspection. They should. Nobody should suffer from lead poisoning. No child will die of lead poisoning, I tell you. If that is followed, it can be achieved. Awareness, as he rightly said, awareness, and awareness, nothing else.
Okay, this lady in front and then this gentleman in the white shirt.
Hi, my name is Mohana. I'm an assistant editor with The Print. So my question is that, since we know that there are everyday items like you mentioned surma, haldi, and sindoor. So, do we have any sort of technology, any portable system that can be used at homes, for detection of these elements in the?
Yes. Okay, Dr. Venkatesh.
I'll answer this question.
Is there a quick?
In
litmus test?
Karnataka, we have a festival called Ganesha Festival. About 5 years ago, 100% of Ganeshas were painted. They used to immerse that in the water bodies. That Ganesha paint had lead. That water used to get lead. Cows and buffaloes used to drink that water. We used to get lead back through their milk and flesh. Then we created awareness. Why paint Ganesha? And because if Ganesha idol is not properly made to cover up the paint, like makeup, somebody is not good looking.
Dr. Venkatesh, I think
That's
her
why-
question is a little different.
That is why, no, how to detect,
How to detect? Yes.
Now, if we can prevent the pollution, where is the question of detection? Why should we go for corrective measures?
That doesn't answer her question. Is there a simple litmus test?
There is a water testing tool kit that is available. It costs about 200 rupees per test. It's available on Google. My question is, why go there? Why should we first of all
That's a
pollute?
broader question, yeah. So does that answer your question? Okay. So this gentleman in the yellow shirt,
Yeah, I am Dr. R.K. Singh. I have one question.
what is your affiliation?
I am with the Legal Initiative for Forest Environment.
Okay.
So my question is related to, there are so many regulations are existing in this country. And the regulatory authority, if they are not well equipped and having the proper human resources, how to enforce the law? Every environmental clearances is having these many conditions that you have to go for a screening of health, this and that, and go to the field. Nothing is happening in the field because the primary responsibility of the State Pollution Control Board is to look into the
What's your question?
question is, what is the NITI Aayog approach to enforce these enforcement authorities, how to build them? Because unless they are
Yes,
having the system.
We got your
it is
question.
not.
So Rajiv, would you like to take this question?
I'll take this question, but NITI Aayog is not an enforcement agency at all. It's an advisory agency. Hang on. And what we have done, again, as I admitted to you, at least as far as lead is concerned, we've not been able to, when I was there, I don't speak on behalf of NITI Aayog now, by the way. So there was a lack of clarity as to where this question should go for enforcement, whether it should be the Ministry of Health or it should be the Ministry of Environment. So those are the two primary bodies, the two ministries who could have, line ministries who would be responsible. So I don't know what's happened now, but the only thing that NITI Aayog can do and will do is to advise on how this has to be tackled. But I must repeat what I said earlier. It is not the lack of regulation or quality standards. It's their implementation which is the problem. And that must be understood clearly.
Any more questions? Done? Yeah, okay. Please go ahead. Sorry? There's an online question, but first let's have the offline question and then we'll have the online question.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Nitish Dogra from Delhi. Mr. Pula, I just wanted to ask you, of course, the rest is fine, but regarding the association with crime, which is also understandable, but I mean, how much, could you actually attribute it entirely to lead? I mean, there are so many factors in something as complex as crime. So wouldn't that be like too simplistic, basically? Just that particular aspect.
Yes, indeed. It's too simplistic to attribute crime just to one particular cause. The causality of this, though, is under investigation right now through a joint study with US EPA and Oxford and some others. That result will come out sometime next year, showing that there is a causal inference for lead exposure and increase in violent crime associations. So I don't think there's any question that there is something here in that particular association. Of course, no one's claiming you're going to solve all of crime just with one particular issue, but this is a significant contributor to the problem.
So what's the online question? Yeah, till then we have one more question.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Subrata Datta. I've just joined Pure Earth as a country director. And before that, I was working with CDC Centers for Disease Control and Prevention with government of USA as India country head. Also, I'll just take little 1 minute to discuss about the success stories about, how to address.
A question, not.
I'm
not a
coming to the
discussion.
question
Yeah,
of.
please come to the question right away.
There are a lot of success stories about this to address the lead issues. I'm not talking about what are the problems are actually. We are talking about how to address the issues, how to come to a solution and take it forward at the grassroots level. Whether can you have a multi-stakeholders platform and some of the people who can lead it? Because from my previous experiences, I engaged WHO, UNICEF, and a lot of other UN and Bill Gates Foundation. Rajiv ji was talking about. We address the issues of malnutrition and also develop the policies with the government of India. So we have Ministry of Health. There are 8 ministries which is set up and to take up the issue, and FSSAI has taken up the lead on food fortification. Rajiv ji is aware of that. And now we have a huge program in this country which took 2 years to develop this policy for the government of India. Whether we can have same kind of platform we can develop in this forum that all multi-stakeholder institutions who are working in this area can take this lead and advise to the ministries to take it forward at the state government. I think that's the way we can take it forward. That is this issue.
Very good advice to the government of India, and I think it's the dream of every bilateral and multilateral agency to engage in policy dialogue with the government. And Rajiv Kumar and I and Karthi also were in that racket for a number of years in the ADB. So let's have the online question.
So, sir, there is Dr. N.S. Prasad, who has actually asked, are there any national or state level policies to control this lead pollution part?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Are there any state or national level policies or any enforcement laws in India to control the lead pollution?
State level policies. Well, I mean, there's certainly the Food Adulteration Act. There is the Environmental Protection Act. They are all applicable all over India. There are state agencies to enforce them. So yes, there are state level policies. There are laws which the states have to implement, have to enforce. A great deal, as Dr. Rajiv Kumar pointed out, a great deal of implementation actually has to take place at the state level. So I think we are done with this seminar, and let me conclude by thanking all our.
So there are a couple of more questions.
Well, we don't have time. That's the whole problem. So thank you very much indeed, and we thank all the panelists for their excellent presentations and their very enlightening observations. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, sir, for chairing the session. Thank you all the panelists for sharing your valuable thoughts with us on the topic. And it was indeed an informative session. Now I would like to call upon Mr. Karthi, Senior Advisor, Pure Earth, to propose the vote of thanks.
I really don't know why I need to give a third vote of thanks. Pradeep has already done one. You have done one. There's no need for me to do a third one. All I'd like to say is that I'd like to thank our distinguished panel for giving us a complete overview of the scale of this problem, what needs to be done. But what I took away from it is that there needs to be two things. One, at the level of government, there has to be a mission program to deal with this issue, rather like Swachh Bharat. And at the level of all of us in the public, we need to be more aware of the issue of lead poisoning. You now know more about it than when you entered this room. We hope that you would carry this message to all your friends and your networks. And let's put pressure on government and let government respond appropriately. And hopefully, one day we will have a lead safe, not lead free, but a lead safe environment. So let's all end with that hope. Thank you for coming once again.